So hello there, young lady. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you on the show today, and we're going to talk about something that I know is a huge concern for those of us who live in this country, um, which is the topic about healthy drinking water and whether it's clean or if we have a bigger problem than what we've been told about. And I know you're quite, the advocate for clean drinking water, and that you've had personal experiences which led you to this. So I guess that's the first question: is what led you down this path? How did what happened to you to where this became such an issue for you that you advocate for healthy, clean drinking water?
Well, it started back in 19, probably 69, when I was a summer tennis pro and got mononucleosis. And I was told I had gotten sick because of burning the candle at both ends, which was true because I was hyperactive teaching tennis, playing tournaments, and just probably did not get enough rest. And then 20 years later, I thought I had mono again. I had headaches, sore throat, and I went to my doctor and naturopath and asked to get blood work done because even though I wasn't a tennis pro at the time, I was feeling the same, effects of mono, and I just couldn't believe that I was okay. And they came back with the blood work, and I went to the naturopath and the MD, and they said, well, your blood work is within the brackets, you're okay. And I wasn't satisfied because I was still playing tournaments, and I just knew my body wasn't right. So I contacted a client of mine who is a PhD physical chemist in Los Angeles who did biochemical nutritional therapy. And I expressed what I just shared with you. And she said, well, I'm going to have you do a couple extra blood tests, write a history, family history of health, etc., send it to me, and come on down and we'll go over your blood work. And that is what changed my life, thank God. Was I flew down to LA, and the first thing she did is she poked me in the arm and said, you need to drink more water, and you need to drink water without chlorine, lead. And I was like, what are you talking about? I live in Portland, God's gift to water, Mount Hood. And then she followed with something kind of shocking. She said, looking at your blood work, it appears that you've been exposed to chemical poisoning. But she said, I looked at your written history and there's nothing there about that. And then I went, oh, well, shoot, all through college, I worked at a dry cleaners to pay for my tennis. And she said, no wonder you got mono in 1969. And it was between my junior and senior year in college. She said, you were breathing trichloroethylene, tetrachloroethylene, and your liver couldn't handle the heavy activity level of you being a teaching pro on top of that exposure. And that's what caused your mono.
Oh,
And
thought that was just a kissing disease. I thought you're out kissing too many people.
well, that's another podcast. I'll never tell.
It's probably best you don't. You don't get in trouble.
Oh
So,
God.
so it was you inhaling. It's not just the fact that you inhaled these chemicals. It's because you were playing sports and it exacerbated it.
Well, it's your liver is your big filter, and my adrenal glands were also shot. So whenever your liver, which is your main filter, it's trying to cope with these chemicals, and they're PCE and TCE for those who want some, letters. And so the stress and strain of the liver being in a position of having to detox on top of what these chemicals were doing to my other systems, including the adrenal glands. I just was tired, and it started affected me like I had the mono. Headaches, sore throat, lethargic, short-term memory loss, all the typical things of a compromised immune system. So that is where she came up with that. And I was just stunned because nobody back in the 60s thought anything about dry cleaning fluids. And I'm sure all of you that are listening, you can smell it in your brain. If you've ever been at a dry cleaners in the old days, you could, as I said, cut the air with a knife. I and the crazy thing was I would watch the owner with big gallon, 55-gallon drums of used cleaning fluid, which was these degreasers. And right outside the double door to the cleaning area was a storm drain. And every day he would just go out whoosh, and dump that into the storm drain. But back then, no one knew anything about it. And even when I was talking to Betty, the chemist, I said, well, of course I didn't write it down because nobody thought anything of those chemicals, that would be a problem.
So there were even so back then there were no regulations of how to dispose of these chemicals they use. They were just allowed to dump them in the drain.
Correct,
Wow.
correct.
Yeah.
And truly, every one of these issues that have come up that have really gotten to the public, whether it was the book and movie A Civil Action that was about Woburn, Massachusetts contamination, where W.R. Grace and Beatrice, those two companies, dumped actually TCE, PCE in their big drums, ended up in the drinking water of the town of Woburn, Massachusetts. And nobody really knew about those kinds of events until enough people got cancer and died. And the latest one is people, if they saw dark waters, there's the new chemicals that are of concern now for drinking water supplies and what it does to humans.
I can't believe that even back in the 60s that the chemists for these companies didn't realize or know, what the dangers were to, if it were to be consumed by humans, or in any way. I can't believe they didn't know the dangers and didn't warn these companies that, these things could happen.
Well, the interesting thing is, if you think about it, let's everybody that's watching this, you and me, Kurt, we're scientists, and we've developed these wonderful chemicals that do have benefit to the general public. So at that point in time, nobody's died. I
Right.
mean, nobody's gotten sick. And when you look at the actual production lines, and it's interesting, Dark Waters referred to the Manhattan Project, a civil action, Manhattan Project, fluoride, Manhattan Project. If people go back, a lot of the people that worked on the Manhattan Project did die, who were on, quote unquote, the assembly line. They handled those chemicals in production all the time. And unfortunately, it's not that the scientists knew this was going to kill everybody. It's they didn't realize until all of a sudden what was the side effect, either of people working in those production facilities or the people that were exposed to them, whether it was in water supplies or touching whatever. But then you had to have enough illness or, God forbid, deaths to get everybody's attention that there's something wrong, that the side effect of these chemicals for humans is another story.
Well, I know hindsight's 2020, but there's some things that I look back in our, how we did things, and that I would have gone. Let's just think about this for a second. Take the station wagon that had the back seat facing the cars that were. It didn't occur to anybody that that was probably not a good idea to put kids back in that seat there at the back end as it sees the car behind it come crashing in. Eh, I know, and again, it's easy for me to say now because it's like we realize that stuff now. But you would think that even back then, the scientists would have realized these chemicals would have been harmful. If it were to be to get into the human body, or even in some cases even to be touched by humans, and it just seems like they would have taken some precautions as to at least how it should be handled.
Well, I think they would be like any of us, and unless you looked at your ingredients and knew from previous experience that, one of the ingredients did cause death. I mean, look at Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, and I think that was published in 65. And it was her research as a marine biologist. She came up with DDT as being really
Yeah.
bad, and it was used all the time in agriculture. And how many farmers probably died of that? I believe my dad probably died early of heart disease because of his exposure on my grandfather's dairy farm and originally back on the farm in the Dakotas. But nobody knew at the time that that would have been the cause until people like a Rachel Carson or, um, in this case, I mentioned Dark Waters because that's the most recent one, that, you know, people, farmers, whoever realize there's death of livestock or inordinate damage done to people, all of a sudden everybody's getting sick. So it's hard to blame it that the scientists deliberately did something. It's once you can quantify that there's a problem, then it's like, what do we do about it?
Right.
Who's responsible?
So you went to it, and it was your chemist, was it, that you went
Yes,
to? Okay, so and she told you need to drink more water, and then
right.
so how did you come about, you know, um, you obviously started drinking more water, and what caused the bells to go up and the alarms to go up to say, hey, there's an issue with our drinking water?
Well, mainly it was her comment about chlorination causes plaque to adhere to the arteries, the byproducts of chlorine. And she asked me, she goes, well, doesn't Portland chlorinate? Well, I didn't even know that water in municipalities was chlorinated back in 88. I didn't have a clue. I knew it kind of tasted funny and it could smell, but it was Portland actually uses chlorine and ammonia, which is called chloramine. Denver, other cities will use it as a disinfectant, which is good because you need it to kill bacteria and viruses. So it isn't that, that's horrible, but then I didn't realize that what is the side effect of consuming that. So when I started reading a book by a Dr. Price called Coronary Cholesterol and Chlorine, and realized in the 60s this doctor had figured out this link. But here, you have this huge heart industry with drugs, statins, et cetera, which was benefiting from everybody kind of having heart disease. And I'm like, geez, my solution for my drinking water, as Betty had said to me, you need to either buy bottled water or get a filter. Well, I ended up just the short version, I got a filter. But I was looking at, here are all these books linking chlorine to heart disease. And here, both my parents died of heart attacks. I mean, heart disease is rampant. And I'm like, wow, if people just took it upon themselves to go out and get a system, they would be drinking great water. The city achieves its goal of killing bacteria, virus, and you continue on with your life in a healthier way. Then all of a sudden, oh, what if you develop a heart disease and now you're on a whole list of drugs to try to cure it, which then go after your liver. And I think that's the biggest concern I had, was I had no idea about what the liver goes through to process chemicals, and including prescription drugs, which I encourage everyone, read side effects and protect your liver.
So
And that's where I was like, wait a minute, everybody's got to be aware of these things.
So I'm going to make the assumption that this chlorine in our water is harmful to you only if you ingest it, because I mean we know that we have swimmers, but Olympic swimmers and stuff who are in the pool, you know, hours
Right,
upon hours every day. And I've seen some of our swimmers, some of these people who've aged in their 80s and 90s, who obviously have lived long lives and yet are in chlorine all the time. I'm sure they're not ingesting the water. Obviously, that would be not advantageous to do so. So is it just the consumption of it, or
Well, the key is everybody's, got different health issues. And I'm not here to say if you all are drinking chlorinated tap water, you're going to drop dead, and that's the only reason. It just is a contributing factor, as is obesity. I mean, I have been an athlete all my life, and having had parents deal with cancer and heart disease at 51, it was like, no, I don't want to be in a hospital. I want to be as healthy as possible. And the ultimate irony here, I was a budding tennis player and teaching pro and drinking lots of tap water as a result of that, and running miles, doing all this fitness. And here I'm drinking all this water and, working and thinking everything's fine. And I'm actually, thank God, not where I thought I was going to be. I could have had a heart attack at the age of 40. I was 38 when I discovered that, whoa, I had been exposed to this and probably had never been functioning properly due to that.
so?
So,
So when you were told to drink more water, you decided that and you were not going to drink tap water because of the chlorine. And now, of course, uh, you know, I know that they add fluoride into our drinking water as well. And is that also a contaminant to our body?
well, fluoride is a really hot button, and I do not want fluoride in my water. And there's many articles, many books that have been written, and I think everybody has to take a look at where does fluoride come from, and why do they use it in drinking water supplies. And my big concern is, why would anybody add something as controversial as fluoride into my drinking water when I pay my municipality to keep things out of the water that could potentially be bad for me? So I personally, with my research, and one of my really incredible book I encourage people, if they were trying to figure out if fluoride is any good, is The Fluoride Deception, which was written by Christopher Bison. And this has fact-based, many pages of footnotes. It's probably one of the most complete books about where did, fluoride come from. In fact, here are the pages of footnotes that was actually not what you want to have in your drinking water, but I'm trying to keep things out of my water supply.
Right. So you're saying less less chemicals in your water, the better.
Or anything other than water.
Right. Okay. So so now what are the new issues that we have with drinking water? What's finding its way into our water today that is a concern to us?
Well, it's like I was talking to you earlier about, I made a little list of different hot buttons that have come up since '88, when I first realized what was going on with chlorine. And everybody, shoot, I can't imagine there's anybody in your viewing audience or listening audience that isn't aware of lead, the potential of lead showing up in their drinking water supplies. And lead isn't added by a municipality. It's not dumped into a landfill. Lead is caused by the leaching of lead from solder in the joints of pipes and galvanized steel pipes from the early days all across the country. There's a huge problem with the infrastructure in the water delivery systems and in individual homes, because they may be small pipes compared to the giant ones the water systems use, but that has been a big issue that the EPA, when I first got my water filter way back in '88, the standard allowed by the EPA, maximum contaminant level, was 50 parts per billion. A year later, in '89, the EPA came up with that's too high, because what they found in their research is there was too much damage being done as a result of children, you name it, the side effects of ingesting lead, that they wanted to get it down to 15 parts per billion. Then just a couple of years later, they went to 0 lead tolerance. And the biggest issue that I'm sure everybody has heard about is, the horror of what happened in Flint, Michigan. And that really brought the lead issue alive because of the damage that it was doing and how many people were exposed. And these people were exposed to 13,000 parts per billion
Wow.
of lead. And here, years earlier, it was supposed to be 0
Right.
allowed.
So, all right. So, why isn't the lead taken out during the process of going through the water treatment plant? What is?
Well, lead's a mineral, so it doesn't get, quote, I mean, it's a different issue. So their job isn't to like filter that out. It isn't, at that time, it wasn't on the 90 primary contaminants that are tested by your water bureau.
Even though
So,
we've known for a long time that what happens when we have
well, here's what the cities are supposed to, sorry for interrupting, but it just hit me. Here's, if I can read from an article I pulled out about Flint, and this was from the local Columbia, March 17th of 2016. The headline is, Snyder, the governor, says the agency misled him on Flint water. Well, Flint water created the problem. The Water Bureau, in fact, I'm going to read this because this will make it simple. Quote, the crisis we're seeing was the result of a state-appointed emergency manager deciding that the city would stop purchasing treated drinking water and instead switch to an untreated source to save money. The state of Michigan approved that decision and did so without requiring corrosion control treatment. And what I wanted to bring out is, you were saying, why don't the cities filter it out? What actually has to be done is, if you are on river or spring water, it's called surface water, that water does not have mineral content in it, and it's considered to be acidic, which when the water goes through, it will start to leach away and eat at the pipes. And in Flint, what they needed to do was have corrosion treatment, which is usually injecting soda ash and lime. It's like they make the water, quote, harder, inject more minerals, and that will coat the pipes or keep the water from leaching lead out of solder or out of the pipes, wherever it is. And everybody in the early days, you would have faucets at home that would actually leach lead into your drinking water, not just the pipes coming to your house. So I'm just going to go on. Without corrosion control, lead from pipes, fittings, and fixtures can leach into the drinking water. These decisions resulted in Flint residents being exposed to dangerously high levels of lead. So what you ended up with is they decided to save money and buy the water without the corrosion control. And so here's the natural water, rainwater, river water, which didn't have the minerals, and that's what caused the problem with the lead. And so then, go ahead.
These pipes, how old are these pipes? Are we talking? Are these decades old?
Well, I was looking up in another article, and it was about the infrastructure issues with the U.S., and it was called a Drinking Water Infrastructure Report Card. And this was just the frightening thing. Here, drinking water is delivered via 1 million miles of pipes across the country. Many of those pipes were laid in the early to mid 20th century with a lifespan of 75 to 100 years. the quality of drinking water in the US remains high, but legacy and emerging contaminants continue to require close attention. While water consumption is down, there are still an estimated 240,000 water main breaks per year in the US, wasting over 2 trillion gallons of treated drinking water. According to the American Water Works Association, an estimated $1 trillion is necessary to maintain and expand service to meet demands over the next 25 years. And another article I was reading was it would take billions of dollars currently to upgrade the infrastructure system. And one of the really horrible things is for smaller water districts, which are, shoot, the majority of drinking water systems would be like Los Angeles or, big cities. They're really stuck because they don't get the money or the attention to it. And this is an article that I kept from the USA Today. This is December 14th of 2016. Dangerous drinking water afflicts rural USA. And it goes on to talk about the lack of money, the lack of testing, and there's 4 million Americans get water from small operators who skipped required tests or did not conduct the tests properly. Wow. So it isn't just big districts like Flint that had a problem with the people running the water districts who actually knew that this could be a problem, but then you've got the small rural districts who are facing the same thing. So kind of in a broad general statement that I'm going to make is like, how do you know any water district is delivering to you the water quality you expect?
So how do you know?
Well, you can go and look up, every water district has a drinking water quality report that they put out. And they should have in there if your local water district had any kind of problem with the 90 that they test, if they were exceeding the maximum contaminant level. For example, lead. And I am sure a lot of people have gotten lead notices. I know Portland has put out lead notices over the years. They've had cryptosporidium notices go out, the waterborne parasite, and they've had E. coli, even though the chloramines are supposed to kill E. coli. So all of you, if you're exposed to water districts, may have gotten water notices. And if that exceeds that maximum contaminant level, they're going to be on TV, they're going to be on the radio, they're going to be in the newspapers alerting you to it. The only problem with that is they have 72 hours to alert you to the problem.
I was shocked by that when I found out about that they have that much time to tell you before they have to tell you when there's already an issue, and that they can wait that long.
Right. And, normally they have gotten it, quote, under control, depending on what the problem is. And usually their big warning is issued to children, infants, your pets, and then senior citizens and elderly. I'm a senior citizen now, but it's frightening because that is the group that can, end up dying or getting really sick, or anyone with a compromised immune system.
Now, you were talking about these other issues with our drinking water, the PFOAs, I believe it was.
Yes.
Okay. So, are these things not able to be taken out during the water treatment process as well, and if so, why? Why? Because that's not a mineral, right?
Correct. But remember, the Water Bureau has a source of water, and then if it's on the 90 list, which is the current national EPA drinking water regulations. These are the primary contaminants that every municipality has to test for. If they're not on this, then they're not going to be concerned about this. Because of what's happened over the last 20 years, thanks to um, the Robert Bellot, the attorney who went after DuPont, and they discovered these perfluorooctanoic, you know, um, uh, uh, acid that has been added as a result of Teflon, by the way, you know, waterproof clothing, etc. You can look it up, but it hasn't become one of the primary contaminants to be tested for. So first the water district has to test. Then if it's on the list, then they go, uh-oh, we've got this. And then does it fall within the maximum contaminant level? Now, if this becomes a big enough deal, my short version, then what you're going to see is every water district will start testing because they will have established a regulatory number. And that's what's tricky. And it seems kind of laughable to me, but it's like you have to come up with somehow what is the number that's not healthy for people. So do you wait until enough people die based on their blood work? Or in this case, Dark Waters, the movie, all of these, 69,000 people got their blood tested in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and can go after DuPont if they end up developing these cancers or these other illnesses as a result of what their blood work showed. So until the EPA has established whatever this maximum contaminant level, and right now kind of a temporary one has been, I think it's like 70 trillion parts uh, per billion. And for example, I have the Los Angeles Water District Water Quality Report, and they have under on page 6 regulatory compliance. So they're now doing what they call notification levels established for 2 fluorinated compounds. So on July 13th of 2018, they have issued health-based drinking water notification levels for PFOA and PFOS. And so now it looks like that Los Angeles is testing for these and will continue to. And then the EPA will take their information along with other municipalities and determine should they change whatever that allowable maximum contaminant level should be. Then, if it shows up in excess, you would get a drinking water notice. But the water facilities are not required to filter these things out. They're supposed to get, kill bacteria and viruses.
So I mean, if it comes to that point where they discover that this is, hurting, people, can they filter that out?
No, that's not what they're paid to do. They're monitoring. So they would monitor, and if your drinking water sample that they tested was above the maximum contaminant level, then you would get a notice that you don't drink your tap water.
So what do
And
people do when they get these notices? This is when they boil their water?
well, a boil water notice would be for bacteria, viruses like E. coli.
Right.
That's common. If you have a lead notice, you don't want to boil water because what it does is it evaporates the water and actually increases the amount of lead in your drinking water. So if you had any kind of notices, it depends on what it is. If it was PFA, PFOS, it would be don't drink your water. And I don't know what they would do to try to eliminate that. What it's been found to be is the exposure could be for towns like in Parkersburg, West Virginia, which had a DuPont landfill. And that is where that water supply got contaminated. So this wouldn't be rampant all over the country. You'd have to have a plant, chemical plant like 3M or DuPont in your neighborhood that was making these kinds of chemicals, and then you had the exposure that they could have been dumped into rivers or a man-made reservoir to dump them. So
I guess what my question is, because I remember you saying that you decided to go with a filtration system. So with your
right.
filtration system, are filtration systems able to take out these PFOS and PFOAs?
Yeah, certain technologies will do that.
Okay.
And so you can protect yourself with a filter, or you'd have to go buy bottled water. Um, and and the interesting thing, by the way, that I hadn't thought of is now I I should be calling some of the bottled water companies like Nestle or Coca-Cola and go, where are your water sources? And are you now testing your water sources for that contamination if that chemical is showing up? And I shared with you earlier, I'm in the state of Washington, and um, we have a fight brewing. Lawmakers open fight with bottled water companies because they're, you know, using all our water. So
Right.
you end up with fish problems. You're getting drained, to put it bluntly. So here's Nestle, all of these companies that make bottled water and sell it. There's a big issue because they're taking away your natural water supplies. So again,
I don't remember the guy's name, but there's a CEO of one of these companies who doesn't believe that drinking water is a human right, like that you should have to pay for it. It was his statement was so absurd. It drew a lot of backlash when he said it, but the audacity to sit there and act as though that's not a human right, that you should be able to have drinking water, and that these companies should be able to have access to these
water supplies.
supplies, and have to and then charge you for it, because you know that's capitalism at its best, right? So um
Yeah,
so
well,
one of so you're talking about bottled water. Well, we'll get back to that. Well, I guess, and I'll make sure I make a note of that, because I definitely want to get back to the bottled water thing. What is the what in your estimation, what is the state of our drinking water in this country right now as a whole?
well, I think anybody can Google that question or use whatever search, and it's just mind-boggling because it's like bringing up this infrastructure test. And uh, for example, in 1993, here was a state of a little town in by Salem, Oregon, the capital, Monmouth, Oregon. They had show up 146 million fibers of asbestos in their water supply, their drinking water, when the EPA was, showing that you should only have a maximum of 7 million asbestos fibers. And I thought, why would I want any asbestos fibers per liter in my water? And it turned out, here's the town had asbestos cement pipes. Well, when you ask me kind of what's the state of, water quality, well, you've got the infrastructure, and then you've got, is there exposure to chemicals from farming? It's like there's more than one issue here. And here the town had to add soda ash and lime to harden the water so it wouldn't break down the cement pipes, which freed up the asbestos fibers. So they had to go through all of this extra treatment, sort of like Flint did for corrosion. Same idea, only poor little Monmouth had asbestos fibers freeing up versus Flint had the issue of lead was leaching out of the pipes. So each water district could have, as I read to you, the infrastructure 75 to 100-year-old pipes. And I know a lot of people go, oh, I have a new house with new pipes. And then I kind of look at them and go, but what are the pipes that are feeding
Right.
your neighborhood?
Yeah, exactly.
How old are those?
So basically, we have a crumbling infrastructure, both above ground and, and underground. And
Right.
and I know no one likes to pay more taxes, but
Oh,
until we are willing to pay for these things, there doesn't seem like there's a you know an
well,
answer in sight.
well, here's one. Anybody on surface water, Portland, Oregon, okay? has to come up with $800 million to build covers for reservoirs, which we get, or in Portland gets its water from the Mount Hood watershed. And nobody can go up there, no cars, trucks. But guess what? Bambi and relatives all poop up there. So you've got problems with waterborne parasites in the Portland water supply. And unfortunately, the chloramines do not kill Giardia and Cryptosporidium 100%. And what Portland has done, and I was raised there, we had big man-made, big cement reservoirs that would collect water for the city of Portland, and those would be drawn on during the summer whenever. So they're exposed. Well, unfortunately, not Bambi, but the two-legged versions of Bambi would climb over the fence and go swim naked in the reservoirs in the summer, and of course would poop and pee, and we would have to have like over 400,000 gallons of water drained because somebody saw some guy pee in the Portland water reservoir, which is amusing because in my science class in college, I think they said you could drink your own urine if you were stranded. That's another topic, but they drained all of this water. So now, because of the other problem is birds can fall dead into the open reservoir, animals could poop, and so could humans. So in all seriousness, the exposure in those open reservoirs has to be eliminated because Portland over the years has come up with different times where they send out Cryptosporidium water notices that, uh-oh, we have a problem. If you're young or you're elderly, get bottled water, and that would be, boiled water would work because it would kill. But then if Portland's got lead issues, you could condense it. But now we are no longer getting any extensions from the feds. They're saying you have to come up with $800 million, and it's going to be, I believe, like in 2024 or something. It has to be done. And guess who's going to pay for that?
You.
Most likely, it's going to be Portland water customers.
Yeah.
And the sad thing is they also feed water to other smaller suburbs who do not have a problem. And they're going to pay for it too.
Right. Wow. So do you think that, in your opinion, that since the revelation of Flint, Michigan, that our water issues gotten any better? Is it worse, or is it stayed status quo?
Well, I think, I even hate to say it, the good news of something like that kind of horror of Flint is it all of a sudden hits people and they wake up. And it's still a large part of the population, unless they get a notice or whatever, they're going to go ahead, continue to drink tap water, and that's fine, whatever they want to do. There is no way to avoid the fact that the infrastructure is crumbling, as you said, and also that there are other contaminants that are showing up that are potentially, health concerns like these PFOA, PFOS. I made a list of others that people in the last couple of years, microcystines. They may not be familiar with microcystine, but everybody has seen articles over the last year or two of blue-green algae. Here in Florida, oh my God, there was just huge sections of water. Nobody could go out with their boats. Okay, well, that blue-green algae puts off a toxin that's called microcystines, and drinking water notices have gone out in areas like that. Even here, I'm way across the country from you, and in Salem, the capital of Oregon, the Detroit Lake is the source of their water. Well, they even had too warm a water, ended up with blue-green algae. They had to send out drinking water notices about the microcystines because, again, if you're young, if your pets, and the elderly shouldn't drink it. And if you want to really be safe for this toxin, buy bottled water.
So are we uh, blind to the fact that there are a lot of other Flint, Michigans out here in this country that we're not even aware yet, and do you feel like are going to be exposed, that that there are other areas like Flint, Michigan throughout this country that it's just going to just show how bad our water system is? Or
Well, the only thing I know is it, the amazing thing when I think of the 32 years or whatever since I stopped drinking tap water, when I look at MTBE became an issue. It was methyl tertiary butyl ether, which was leaking from underground gasoline storage tanks. That was a headline for a period of time. We already addressed lead, then the latest microcysteines. Then you've got this PFA issue coming up, which is really huge. And all I know is the EPA, which is underfunded, and they're all trying to come up with testing standards, and that's where it comes down to it. I mean, my first degree was in elementary education, and I remember learning how to do a test. Well, you had to have a certain percent fail, and blah blah blah. So here these guys are trying to figure out, after the fact that they discover some chemical or something is bad for you, what level is bad? How much of this can show up in your drinking water before it's considered to be dangerous? And that's what I have a problem with, is like, little Monmouth, here they had this huge problem with their pipes, yet the EPA was saying 7 million asbestos fibers, it's okay. And I'm like visualizing, how is that okay for my kidneys and liver? I was visualizing a chia pet, with asbestos fibers if they did some kind of weird x-ray. But it's like, do I want to leave my drinking water quality up to it's sort of an operation that does operate in hindsight? Because first they have to discover it's not okay, then figure out what's the correct protocol, then get all the municipalities who are cash strapped to add that to their testing, and so on.
so what do you say to people? And trust me, I've met a lot of these people. Go, this is all a bunch of hooey because I drank water out of the hose when I was a kid. It's like nothing's wrong with me, and that's just, they think that they drank their own, they would go swimming out in a mud puddle and drink that as well, and and look at me, I'm healthy. What do you think
Okay.
of those people?
Well, what comes to mind, bear with me, is, okay, I hit 70. I go to the doctor or my DO, and they look at me, and any place I've ever gone that's medical, they go, are you on any prescription drugs? And I go, no. And I go, occasionally I do take migraine medication, but fortunately, maybe twice a year. Okay, that's it. They're flabbergasted. So when somebody says to me about, oh, I drank the water, or whatever, I kind of look at them and I look at their age and I go, I don't care what age. Okay, I ask them, are you on any prescription drugs? And it's shocking, because you will find, especially in my age group, at least they're on 5.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay. And I go, and what are they for? And I go, look, I'm not saying that you have contaminated drinking water. I'm saying, are you drinking enough water as a potential for some of these ailments? But it's like, everybody tells you for good health, you're supposed to drink 8 to 10 glasses of water a day. Why does everybody tell you that? Because guess what? It's like oil in your car. What happens if you don't have enough oil in your car? You blow the engine, So it's more like, I'm not going to argue with somebody whether they drink bottled water or they, drink tap water or they drink filtered water. It's the concern is up to everybody,
So
but
we just went over because my next question was going to be okay. So for those out there who go, look, I don't want these PSOA or PFOAs and PFOSs in there are my water. I don't want to take a chance of lead being in my water or any other of these chemicals, because I understand too that people are dumping their drugs down their toilets and stuff, and
oh,
that's making it through our water as well. Is that correct?
yes,
Okay.
and there's testing now for they call them emerging compounds like DEET or birth control pills. I mean, it's amazing, and that goes back to like I started with. Here's Dick dumping, the degreasing cleaning fluids, PC and TC, down the storm drain, and now everybody's concerned. Oh, what else is being dumped down the
Right.
storm drain? And you're absolutely right. It's like, oh no,
So
that can screw you up.
So for people out there who want to, take the precaution of making of making sure that these things are in the water, what are some of the solutions that they have that they can, what steps can they take?
Well, really the only thing, other than if you call up your water bureau and go, hey, do you test for emerging compounds, which is kind of the category of prescription drugs, DEET, ibuprofen, whatever. Um, and if they don't, it's because there's not a maximum contaminant level, which I think that is the case. So the problem is you can you can call up your water districts, or you can go look at water quality reports and just go over and over again, well, do we have these in the water? Well, I remember way back when I first wanted to find out about lead, I called the top testing lab in Portland, who tested actually Portland's water for them. And the guy said, don't waste your money on testing water for lead, because you could take one sample and 2 minutes later run a sample and you'd have a lead sample. So it's a waste of your time. If the city has soft water, you're probably going to have lead show up at some point, but don't spend the money. So my attitude is I am just not going to drink the tap water, because after looking at all these things that have come up, and the changing of the drinking water standards for lead started with 50, then went to 0 within 2 or 3 years in the late 80s. And before that, I was drinking water with lead forever. And I wanted to bring up, was mind-boggling to me. The high school that I went to, Portland, being soft water, okay, they came up 2 years ago that there were like all these schools with high lead levels. Well, it turned out the high school I went to, and I might add, I lived within 4 blocks of Grant High School in Portland. One of the faucets that they tested had 57,600 parts per billion of lead. And I'm like, I was drinking out of those water fountains all through high school. I played on the tennis team. I drank a lot of water at Grant Park out of the municipal water fountains. And I actually want to get my blood tested for lead to see where I am, because it could have caused some of my issues that I've had. Who knows? And I also am going to get a lab, and my own doctor's office will not do testing for PFOA or PFOS. I found that out this week because they don't have a test for it.
Right.
So I'm going to go to a private lab and get tested out of pocket for lead and see if I have the other chemicals in my bloodstream, which is,
I just don't understand how you can have lead levels that high and have it go unnoticed or, for so long.
well, it's only because Flint, okay, and different school districts, all of a sudden, people were, I think, demanding that water should be tested. And at Grant, all these schools are having to ship in bottled water. And I remember going to a recycling place a couple of years ago, and in came these huge plastic bags of, 16-ounce bottles, right? And at the recycle, where you get a nickel a bottle in Oregon, we have a, pay for recycling. And I'm like, holy mackerel. I looked out, here's this huge box truck with just huge bags of these bottles. And it turned out it was Portland School District coming in with all the bottles that they had been providing to these schools that had the super high lead levels. So the kids were not supposed to drink out of the faucets, the fountains. That's amazing.
So you can contact your water treat or your water
Well,
municipality and ask about these things and if they test for them.
well, here's the kicker. That isn't the city of Portland's problem. That was the plumbing in the schools was so old that, and galvanized steel and lead solder in all of it, that it was the wearing down and the leaching through the buildings. You'd have to replumb all of these schools in
Right.
order to eliminate. So it really wasn't the city of Portland's fault, because the city of Portland wasn't getting tests like that where they tested, but it was every homeowner could end up with having various levels depending on their pipes, faucets, etc. So that's where you have to protect yourself.
Right. So again, so what are other solutions that people can take?
Well, it's
Talk about
basically,
bottled water.
yeah, bottled water. Um, the statistics on bottled water, this one is a kicker. I think this one, Americans consumed in 2018 over 14 billion gallons of bottled water, 40% of which comes from treated tap water.
Wait, wait,
And
wait. 40% comes from what?
it would be your city water being, quote, again treated by a bottled water company.
So
And
they're
you,
taking your city water and selling it back to you at a much higher rate than what it would cost you if you just took it out of your faucet.
right. But what they usually do when they say treated is they've taken out the chlorine. So you don't have the color, taste, and odor. So
Okay.
that is the minimal. And I'm always looking at the new bottled water, which is a whole nother topic. But you're right. So you're taking, like, for example, Portland City water and then bottling it after filtering the chlorine out. Because what most people are aware of with their city water is they smell and taste chlorine.
Right.
And unfortunately, all the rest that's going to get you, you can't see, smell, or taste. So then going on, what people, if you're against fossil fuels, people don't realize that each year 17 million barrels of oil are used to produce bottled water. That's 340 million gallons of gasoline. Only 1 in 5 bottles are recycled. Those 4 non-recycled bottles, about 38 million water bottles each year, contribute to 3 billion pounds of plastic water bottles added to landfills or scattered across our environment.
Wow. That's amazing.
Oh,
And not
so
so all right, so bottled water not so much. So we are now have what? So our last solution is what? A filtration system, right?
right,
But
right.
then again, the problem with a filtration system is not all filtration systems are equal. So how does one determine, whether what filtration system they should get? Is there a means, a test to decide?
Fortunately, there is, and that was an issue that I had when I was looking for a filter. Is I was having to call these companies and ask them to send me copies of actual independent lab tests, because when I called them, they tell me that they would take out all of these different contaminants. That fortunately, I had Betty, the chemist, who gave me, you need to make sure these take out XYZ. So back in the day, I was on long distance calling these companies and going, can you send me, don't just tell me you take it out of the water, send me the actual lab reports, which I would wait patiently in the mail and they wouldn't come. Okay. And so it was really frustrating because being a tennis pro, retired tennis pro, and I was stockbroker at the time, what I did is I called everybody up I knew who had a filter drinking water system, ask them which brand they had, and that then I would kind of go, okay, I'll call those companies and have them, if they're legit, they'll send me lab tests. So that was how I did my research. Then, thank God, in 1991, because of all of a sudden, as the country goes, there were all of a sudden everybody was trying to get into the water filter industry. So there became a plethora of all kinds of water filters that made all kinds of claims, and you didn't know who was telling you the truth. So fortunately, in 1991, at that time it was called the National Sanitation Foundation. Now it's called NSF International, was contacted by the EPA because the water filter industry, the manufacturers got together and wanted to get a testing protocol that would level the playing field. That if you paid that NSF nonprofit lab to test your filter for what you wanted it to take out of the water, then you knew that if somebody looked for a filter and saw the NSF logo, then you could look on the label or in the marketing material and see, did it actually take out what you want out of your water? So that standard testing protocol is recognized by every city and state water agency in the country. So a person can go to the nsf.org website, type in a manufacturer, and then look and see if they actually were tested by NSF. And the other source is the California Drinking Water Department is the strictest for claims made by water filtration. They also have a list of certified drinking water systems that were either tested by the NSF lab or by an independent lab to the actual NSF testing protocol.
Oh, that
And believe, yeah,
no, I was gonna say that's good to have so that people know they're not being, scammed by these different companies who make these
right.
outrageous claims of things that they don't do. So that's
And a really important part about California is if your company, let's say it's the Kurt water filter, and you want to make a claim to customers, which obviously who wouldn't want to sell their filter in California, the biggest drinking water market in the country. If you want to make a claim about a health contaminant that your Kurt water filter takes out, you have to submit your testing information to the state of California. And then if you meet their testing protocol standards, you become, your company would be on the list, and it would show that you tested for whatever contaminants you wanted to claim. If you did not submit that testing protocol and you started marketing your filter in California and made health claims, you could be sued both criminally and civilly for those claims,
right.
especially if it was waterborne parasites, because you could have somebody die if they were on, cancer treatment, compromised immune system, etc. So
Well,
one,
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say one for sure way, if you're looking at a drinking water system, see if it's tested and certified by nsf.org, and or go to California, or you can ask the company, do you sell your filters in California?
Well, I will say this. I've had a water filtration system for years, and I think some of the advantages of having it is one, it's so much cheaper than buying bottled water.
Oh,
I mean, it's not even remotely close. It's a few pennies compared to dollars for the same amount of water. Number two, I know that, by not contributing all this plastic, I'm doing the environment a good, solid. And and so those were two of the main reasons why. And not only that, convenience. I Because I used to buy bottled water years ago, and just the inconvenience of going in and having to pick up these huge cartons of water all the time was just crazy. So, and I still see people do it, and I just shake my head and going, you're wasting so much money, and you're contributing to, harming the environment with all these plastic bottles and things. And now that after you made that statement about how much, fuels used for
Oh,
for the, making
to
the,
make plastic bottles.
that's crazy. So, but yeah, so I really appreciate all the information that you've given. And again, I think it's important for the listeners and viewers to understand, you're not claiming that, hey, you're going to die if you drink tap water. You're just saying, look, why take risk? Why not be as healthy as you can and make the healthiest choices that you can, because I do, having been a personal trainer for decades, I do know that our genetics plays a huge role. I know people who can smoke cigarettes, and my father was one of them. Smoked from the time he was like 10 or 12, something like that. Never, had the first sign of cancer, emphysema, or anything else. And yet, there are people who just breathe in secondhand smoke and have died from lung cancer. So I know that genetics plays a big role in that. So again, if we know that that it's not good for the body, and and it may not affect you or me, it may affect others. And so why take that risk if it doesn't need to be taken? Especially if we want to live a long, healthy life, and not just a long life and on, like you said, 5 or 6 different medications. Because I'm like you, the doctors are always, especially nurses, because I always find there's a different nurse each year when I go in for my physical, and they're like, you're not on anything? And I go, no. And they're like, really? And I go, really? So they don't see
Well,
that often.
and as Betty said in the first appointment when I went to LA, she said, Joanne, every molecular function needs pure water, not pop, not coffee, not beer, not an energy drink, water. And she goes, do I make myself clear? And I said, oh, okay. And the other part that I used to tell people that really hit me, and when I think of all the people that have had colon cancer or, indigestion, I look at all the ads for all the antacids, Prilosec, whatever. And it was like, if you drink enough water, that is going to aid digestion, everything.
Right.
And one of the things that I used to say to people, how do you flush a toilet if you don't have water in the tank? And you look at the people with intestinal bowel issues, it's like, hello.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed having you, and again, thank you for all the information, and it's important that we get it out there to people. And I appreciate your calls. I appreciate all that you do, and keep fighting the great fight. I want to definitely have you back on again in the future, and we'll talk more about how things are going, and if they're, again, if they're changing, if we actually wake up and realize, what's going on, and make sure as a people that we change this and have something done about it. So
Okay. Well, thank you for having me, Kurt.
my pleasure. Well, listen, you have a great week, and we'll talk again soon. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And everybody else, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.